House of the Dragon Episode 3 Ending Explained. With another time jump being present within Westeros, but this time it being 2 years since we were last with the characters in Episode 2, the title of the show reflected the king's newborn son, who was the second of his name and was now present. With a battle between Corlys, Daemon and the Crabfeeder, we saw an uphill battle at the Stepstones, whilst also witnessing a conflict in interests in the realm and the mind of Rhaenyra, as she felt that her position as heir to the Iron Throne was getting weaker due to the birth of her half-brother. So with this, I thought I'd recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from Episode 3 of the show. So let's get into it. Here is House of the Dragon Episode 3 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The episode started off with us seeing a glimpse of the battle at the Stepstones, where again, without saying a word, we saw just how menacing the Crabfeeder was. He used his tools to nail his victims and then released some crabs upon them, which is what gave him the signature name. He was referred to by his real name, Cragger Strahar, where he's the Prince Admiral for the Triarchy. The Triarchian army were the ones that were fighting by the Crabfeeder's side, and were made up of men that were from 3 of the free cities who sit outside of the hold of Westeros. This battle had been going on for a while, as we knew, considering that we first heard of it occurring at the end of Episode 2, which was 2 years ago, and it was clear to see that Daemon and Corlys were not in the best position. However, we did see that having the dragon was advantageous. We got our first close-up look to the Crabfeeder in this episode, and it was clear to see that he was riddled with grayscale, which is a disease that takes over the whole body, and one of his eyes appeared to have a mist covering it, which to me showed some kind of weakened vision in the eye. He was a menacing character to look at, and is something that would appear in your nightmares. The fact he didn't say a word throughout it all was also something that added to the haunting nature. Back in King's Landing, we saw 2 main things getting addressed in the episode. One was that Aegon II was born, and Otto and Allicent were doing what they could do to try and persuade King Viserys to name Aegon as heir to the throne, removing Rhaenyra out of the line. And we also saw the fact that Rhaenyra was now of age and her father wanted her to marry, despite the fact that this was something that she wasn't really on board with. The rising tensions were clear to see within the family, and these started at the end of Episode 2, where we saw the king announce his intentions on marrying Allicent, who was Rhaenyra's best friend. So time hasn't mended the wounds or the attitude that Rhaenyra held. You could sense the feelings that she held when she stayed put inside of the carriage, and the amalgamation of cheers for the king, Allicent, and Aegon erupted, something she's not experienced and knows is a representation of the want for him to be next in line instead of her. Even the people at the celebration were expressing their interest along with the man behind the entirety of the plan, Sir Otto Hightower. He laid the foundations for this way back in Episode 1, and it appeared to be that it's going his way for now. The king and Rhaenyra had a public display of a disagreement which was about nobody being above the duty of their role, and how hers was to marry and continue the line. But this led her to run off into the woods where Sir Criston Cole chased her and accompanied her. It was clear to see that the king was in obvious distress about multiple things. You could sense that he was mourning his wife, who we saw died in Episode 1 of the show. He stated how he was the love of her life and his greed and desire to follow a dream that he had many years ago. One of him having a son, which is what led to his selfish nature to push for another child, ultimately resulting in her death. He was concerned over Rhaenyra and the fact that there was tension within the family, which could make a house look weak, especially when there's already controversy around the decision that he made. There was also the pushing from Otto around the ask for him to reconsider Rhaenyra as heir, and the desire to put Aegon as next in line, and also the battle in the Stepstones, which the crown did not condone, but there was pressure to support his brother despite the fact that the king was reluctant to. All of this was met with a lot of drinking of wine and discussing with his new wife Allicent, who we saw was now pregnant with another child. Following this, we witnessed 2 of the same things occur, but they gave off different meanings. We saw the king facing off with a stag, and we also saw Rhaenyra facing off with a wild beast. Rhaenyra fought the beast without it being restrained and added a lot of overkill to her technique, showing strength, passion, emotion, resilience, and a change of mindset that this situation has given her. Whereas we saw the king face the stag whilst it was being restrained, and upon the first strike it didn't do any serious damage, representing the weakened mind that he now has and how the situation is impacting him. We also saw something else supporting this, in the sense that the men were originally hunting for a white stag for the king to take, as it was meant as a sign that Aegon was supposed to be heir to the throne, and would act as a sign of God. But this was never found by them. Instead, it was Rhaenyra who the White Stag approached and she let go, further cementing the very idea that she is the rightful heir to the throne. Once returned, we saw a bloody Rhaenyra walk back in front of everybody and she didn't address a single person. It's clear to see that she wants to be the ruler of Westeros, and she fears for her father's loyalty and the lack of trust that she is the right person to do the job. We heard Otto state how the realm would tear itself apart if Rhaenyra was next in line, so it's going to be troubling times, especially considering that the king even said to Rhaenyra that on her mother he wouldn't change his decision, despite questioning it once before. This leads me to think that he's going to die at some point, before one of the time jumps in the next 2 episodes occur, and we're going to see Otto and Allicent manipulate the situation, and Rhaenyra be forced out of being heir and Aegon named as ruler. After we were done in Westeros, we went back to the Stepstones, where we saw that Daemon and Corlys were losing significantly, and they only had enough supplies to last them for 2 more weeks. We witnessed somebody that the king had sent with a note for Prince Daemon, which mentioned how the king was going to send 10 ships and 2,000 men to assist in the aid of the battle, which was met with Daemon mercilessly beating the messenger. Daemon has always lived in his brother's shadow throughout the entirety of his life, and they were extremely different individuals. Daemon operates outside the ruling of the crown since he was banished, and you could sense that he viewed the message from his brother as a way of condescending him, and him feeling as though he wasn't good enough to complete what he started without the assistance of his brother. This led Daemon to go to the Stepstones on his own and take on the entire army, the very thing that Rhaenyra mentioned about doing as a plan. I was surprised to see that the Triarchy had been winning, considering Daemon quite comfortably took out a lot of the soldiers after pretending to surrender, but he did make it relatively far before being struck with an arrow. He was destined to be doomed if the dragon didn't come in with all of the other men, but with his burning desire, just like his niece earlier on in the episode, it allowed him to take on the Crabfeeder, which sadly we didn't see, and he killed him, cutting him in half in the most gruesome of ways. Daemon has a strong mindset, and it's something that's going to come in handy for Rhaenyra when they eventually cross paths again. I believe that the king choosing to not marry Rhaena Velaryon and instead marrying Alicent is going to come back to get him, due to the fact that the Velaryon house seems to not be associated with the Targaryens anymore, other than Daemon, and the strength that could have come with it by uniting the 2 houses will likely need to come in handy one day. I thought this episode was a good one. It was slower in pace up until the final 10 minutes, but the first battle of the show went down well. We're seeing the rift forming, the changing of opinions, and the conflict that's likely going to erupt. With the Crabfeeder now being killed and that threat being neutralized, the only threat now lies within King's Landing, and it's that of the realm, the public opinion, and what I imagine will be the pushing from Otto Hightower to get Aegon as next in line to the throne. It's going to be an interesting episode 4. So, there you have it, House of the Dragon episode 3 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on House of the Dragon, such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you want to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of episode 3? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.